What's up in War Eagle War Report family? You got Ike Jones back with another morning drop. Today, we're asking the question, does Auburn men's basketball still have a shot at the regular season SEC title? Y'all know how we do right here, War Report style. Let's drop it on them.
You are now listening to the War Report. Drop.
Morning drop. It's your guy Ike Jones in here on a Monday morning, February the 12th. Hopefully everybody is having a wonderful morning. We're in here talking a little college basketball on a Monday. Auburn coming off of a tough loss versus Florida. Still has 7 games left in the season. And the question is, can Auburn still capture the regular season title for the SEC? Before we get started, you guys need to be doing the necessary out there in social media land, sharing the video at the War Report. Hashtag get your weight up. Please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We definitely appreciate that. Where my basketball folks at, man? We normally don't do morning drops on basketball, but today we got to talk about it, man. We're getting down to the crunch time and want to know, can Auburn still pull it off? Right now Auburn is sitting at tied for third in the conference with 7 games left. Everybody else has 7 games except for Tennessee, who has 8 games still remaining on the schedule. And 8-3 in conference. Tennessee is 7-3 in conference, so just ahead of them in the win column. Bama and South Carolina both at 9-2 in conference. So Auburn is 1 game behind the leaders in conference and still plays South Carolina coming up. So that's going to be a crucial game Auburn needs to get. But what I want to do is just take a look at the path that they have for all of the teams that are here in the top 4, because I believe that those 4 teams, South Carolina, Bama, Auburn, and Tennessee, have the best track for getting there. Kentucky pulling up the rear in the top 5 there at 6-4 in conference. But I think that as far what we're going to examine is just the top 4 teams in the conference, and do we have an opportunity to make up ground versus those? Let's start with the team who's at the top of the conference, and that's South Carolina. South Carolina sitting at 9-2 in conference, 21-3 overall on the season. South Carolina definitely the surprise team of the SEC this season. Only 3 losses overall on the season, only 2 in conference. But remaining on the South Carolina schedule, the aforementioned matchup coming up this week versus Auburn. South Carolina is currently ranked number 45 in the net. Coming into not Jordan Hare. I'm so used to talking about football. Coming into Neville Arena, where Auburn is ranked number 7 in the net. Auburn undefeated at home so far this season, and undefeated in SEC play at home, welcoming South Carolina in. It's a game. It's let's say how it is. It's a must-win game for Auburn. Auburn needs to get this win to still have a shot at the SEC regular season title. But number 7 right there is Auburn in the net versus South Carolina. Next up for South Carolina is back at home versus LSU. LSU is number 94 in the net. And LSU has not played. I mean, listen, nobody's played particularly well on the road. South Carolina actually has played well on the road. Let's take a look at the losses that South Carolina has so far this season. The 2 losses that they had were, the 3 losses on the season: at Clemson, so that was a road game, at Alabama, and then a home game versus Georgia. So the two of their 3 losses this season have been on the road, at Alabama and then at Clemson. But they've been pretty steady home or road, so I don't know that that's going to be a big thing. Auburn, plays much better in their building, though, so it's going to be a tough matchup. LSU, though, going on the road to South Carolina, I don't know how unless they just fumble that game completely, I don't know how South Carolina doesn't come out with a victory there. Next, they go on the road to Ole Miss, which is a tough building to play in. Ole Miss kind of playing up and down this season, but always plays better in that building. I think Ole Miss will be jazzed up for that game. We'll see what happens. Ole Miss is number 58 right now in the net. Texas A&M is the next road trip for them, and this is going to be a tough game because, again, this is a road trip, and Texas A&M, one of the better defensive teams. Texas A&M just beat Kentucky, not Kentucky, but Tennessee recently by double digits in that building. So a road trip to Texas A&M going to be a tough one there. They get Florida at home, who is ranked number 31 in the net. Tennessee at home, the 6th rank in the net, Tennessee. And I'm using net rankings because that's what determines quad 1, quad 2, and really ultimately what's going to determine seeding down the road. But they welcome Tennessee into the building. That's going to be a tough game. And then they finish on the road versus Mississippi State. And Auburn has, already seen what can happen in that building versus a tough Mississippi State team on the road. So South Carolina, when you look at their remaining games, on average, they're facing 38.42 teams with a 38.42 ranking in the net for the last 7 games that they have on their schedule, which is the toughest net ranking average for any of the top 4 teams in the SEC. I think South Carolina's got a tough road to get to the end of the season, currently leading the SEC, and for Auburn's sake, I think that they need to drop at least 3 of those games for Auburn to get there, including a head-to-head loss to Auburn. They need to drop at least 2 more of those, if not 3, for Auburn to comfortably be there. You can take a look at the schedule for yourself and determine, is there a path for South Carolina to drop 3 or 4 of those remaining 7 games, including a loss to Auburn. Next up, the team who I think is kind of in the driver's seat, even though they're number 2, and that's Bama. They have 7 games remaining. Bama ranked number 5 in the net right now. They have a trip. They have Texas A&M coming into their building next. They are the number 37 team in the net. Then they face Florida at home. They actually have to play Florida twice in these final 7 games, but they play Florida at home, the number 31 ranked team in the net. Then they have to go to Kentucky, the number 25 ranked net team. Then to Ole Miss, back-to-back games on the road, Kentucky and Ole Miss. Again, Ole Miss is number 58 currently in the net. Tennessee at home, tough game right there at home for them to play, but it is in their building. And then they have to go on the road to Florida. Again, Auburn fans, you already know, on the road at Florida, not a gimme game. And then you get Arkansas to finish it off in your building. Arkansas has been up and down this season. I don't know if they will have pulled it together by that point in time, but number 28 team in the 128th team in the net. So Bama faces an average net ranking opponent of 45.14 for their remaining 7 games in the season. Again, similarly to South Carolina, in order for Auburn to be able to capture the regular season title, I think that Bama has to lose at least 3 of those games, if not 4. You can take a look at that schedule and tell me, do you see 4 losses on Bama's schedule? They don't play particularly great on the road, but their road trips are Kentucky, Ole Miss, and Florida. Tough. 3 tough road games. That Kentucky game, I mean, goodness, man, that game might be, I'd be shocked if the over under for that game wasn't somewhere around 190. Like they're going to score a bunch of points probably in that game between those 2 teams. But at the road, especially at Kentucky in their building, that's going to be tough. Next up, we'll take a look at Tennessee. Tennessee has 8 games left. They have the most games left on the schedule for the top 4 teams that we're examining for this purpose today. First, they go on a road trip to Arkansas, the number 128 net team. Then they have Tennessee, honestly, man. I said Bama's in the driver's seat. That's more so because of the record, but Tennessee's remaining games, they have some cream puffs left on their schedule. At Arkansas, at home versus Vandy, at Missouri. It gets a little tough after that. They welcome in Texas A&M and Auburn back-to-back. Then they go on the road to Bama and on the road to South Carolina, and then they finish off the season versus Kentucky in their building. That's an average net ranking of their opponents of 79.75, the lowest net ranking of the 4 teams that we're examining here on the path to potential SEC championship for the regular season for Auburn. For Tennessee, who is currently tied with Auburn, I think that Auburn would be fine if Tennessee drops 2 of those games. And Auburn can afford to, because they're 1 game ahead, lose the game to Tennessee, and Tennessee lose 2 more and still be fine. Only if Auburn only loses to Tennessee. But comfortably, Tennessee still needs to probably lose 3 of those games. That one's the one where I find a more difficult path to 3 losses, right? You're going to go on your road games are at Bama and at South Carolina. Both of those definitely games that Tennessee could lose. But, because you kind of need Bama to lose one of those games, Tennessee is one of the more probable losses left for Bama. So, South Carolina on the road, potentially I could see that as a loss there. Really, it comes down to Auburn needs to win the head-to-head versus South Carolina and Tennessee if you're going to drop 1 to 2 games left on your schedule. And speaking of the remaining Auburn schedule, the opponents left for Auburn this season are South Carolina at home, Kentucky at home, at Georgia, at Tennessee, versus Mississippi State at home, at Missouri, and then back at home versus Georgia. So you get Georgia twice. You go on the road to Georgia, to Tennessee, and to Missouri. Average net ranking of the opponents left for Auburn is 65, which is the second easiest as far as net rankings are concerned for teams left in this top 4 in the SEC. Auburn absolutely, in my opinion, has a path to continue towards a goal for getting the SEC regular season title. You have to win the South Carolina and Tennessee games to have a prayer, though. You lose those 2 games, I don't really know how the math gets you there unless you sweep the remaining games. You got to go 5-2 in the remaining games anyway, but I don't know how you get there if you lose one or both of those games versus South Carolina and Tennessee. Tough road ahead, definitely doable. South Carolina in your building, definitely an easier game because it's at home. Tennessee's a tough matchup anywhere, tough matchup on the road. And then you got a kind of a sneaky game at Georgia. I don't think Missouri is going to be I don't want to discount Missouri. I don't think Missouri is a very good basketball team this year. They're not going to just go down without a fight. But Missouri on the road, I think that's a game that you should win. Mississippi State at home, a game you should win. Kentucky at home. If Kentucky brings the same kind of defense that they've been playing into Neville Arena, there's no chance for Kentucky to win that game. But, hey, listen, it's college basketball. Anything can happen. But at home versus Kentucky, at home versus Georgia, those should be games that you're able to get dubs in your building. Your tough games, again, are going to be on the road versus Tennessee, on the road versus Georgia, and then that South Carolina game coming up at home is going to be a tough game. I think Auburn needs to go 5-2, and you got to at least split Tennessee and South Carolina to even have a shot. It's a tough road ahead in order for Auburn to get there, but definitely have a path. But I want to know what you guys think about that, about the chances for Auburn to potentially get into a scenario where they can win the SEC regular season title based on those things that I've just laid out there. Again, I didn't put Kentucky in this, but Kentucky definitely has an opportunity to get there, but we'll see what happens when it comes down to it. All right, that's enough of me talking. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on all these things. As always, we have sponsors for our morning drop, and today we are back here with Manscaped. It's 2024, and we are in full swing, and that means it's time for a New Year's resolution check-in with our friends at Manscaped. Newsflash, it's never too late to level up your grooming game and keep your bush tamed. Manscaped's new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is every man's cheat code to look good, feel good, and turn the page on confidence in the new year. Whether you're going for a trim or that clean-shaven look, this trimmer has you covered. Trusted by over 10 million men worldwide. And now it's your time to get a grip on your grooming with this exclusive offer by going to Manscaped and using code RAPPORT for 20% off plus free shipping. The ball is dropped, but don't drop the ball on your balls. Make sure that you head over to manscaped.com using code RAPPORT. You get your 20% off plus free shipping. Embrace the new you and definitely embrace a new trimmer courtesy of Manscaped. Let's get over into the comments section and see what you guys are thinking about basketball this morning. Appreciate you dropping in with me as always here, Green Name Gang. James Barnett says, I still think we can pull it off. My only question is, will Bama drop any more games? I think Bama definitely drops some more games. I don't think that Bama goes undefeated for the remainder of their regular season. I think that they have in my opinion, they and Tennessee have the easier paths to it. But I think that Bama definitely loses at least 2 more games in the season. But I think that Bama needs to lose 3 to 4 in order for Auburn to comfortably get there. But yeah, Bama will drop some more games this season. Corey jumps in and says, Corey Weber, that is, what Bruce Pearl said post-game made so much sense. Florida was off midweek. AU had one practice for Florida, and Florida had the entire week to prepare. Absolutely was a tough spot to be in as an Auburn team coming into a well-prepared, well-rested team. Florida's got a tough road ahead for them this season. You hope that they can play spoiler for a couple of teams that are on the schedules for opponents that you need to drop games in order for Auburn to get in a good space. And so we'll see what happens. James Barnett thinks Auburn just needs to win out, period. I think it's a tough task, man. I don't know that you go undefeated for your remaining games. I think that the worst that Auburn can do is drop 2, as I said before. If you drop 3, I think you put yourself in a scenario where you don't have a shot and you need a whole bunch of help from some people. In my opinion, again, South Carolina and Tennessee are the rubber games in there. You can't go 0 of 2 in those. If you do that, then you absolutely can't have a slip up anywhere else in your schedule, and you need a lot of help from some people beating Tennessee and South Carolina. Chris S. saying South Carolina out here doing the best we the North impression. Listen, man, South Carolina's doing a darn good job this season. This is a team I anticipated being better this season. I didn't think they were going to be this good. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't think that they were only going to be, a 3-loss team at this point and only 2 losses in conference. It's going to be an interesting task to take down South Carolina coming up here. Corey asks, does Auburn have a bye coming up soon? Absolutely do have a bye. Every team gets a bye this year. So let's see. Let me take a look at the Auburn schedule to tell you when that is. So the next game Auburn has is the 14th versus South Carolina, then the 17th versus Kentucky, and then you're off for a week before you head to Georgia. So your bye week is between Kentucky and Georgia, so you have that whole week to prepare for Kentucky, right? To prepare for the road game versus Georgia. So Auburn, gets a week's rest before going on the road, which, again, I think is kind of a trappish game versus Georgia, but you got time to get in there and prepare and make sure you're ready to go. That's even more reason why Auburn should not go and lose to Georgia. Georgia's a tough team. Mike White has been a coach that has played tough against Auburn in his stint at Florida. And last year, Auburn dropped this road game versus Georgia versus that Mike White team, and that was a worse team in my opinion. Georgia's a tough team that doesn't really give up even when they're down double digits late in games. They find ways to make it interesting at the end of games. It's going to be a tough game, but Auburn has a full week to prepare for this. If you handle business at home versus South Carolina and Kentucky, and then you get a week off, you should come into that game full head of steam in order to go out there and get a victory versus Georgia. Then you got a tough road game versus Tennessee after that. So looking forward to seeing how Auburn handles that scenario. Chris S. jumps back in and says, I think Auburn could drop 1 more and still be in a good position to win the SEC. Got to beat Tennessee and South Carolina, though. I agree with this. Again, I think you could drop 2 more, but you need a lot of help if you do that. Chris says, I don't think 13-5 can win the SEC. 14-4 is probably the limit. I think 14-4 is your best case, but I think 13-5 can get you there. I do believe that is still a probability, not the best possibility. Of course, less losses is always going to be best. 14-4 is the ideal space, and that's really kind of where I think I predicted Auburn would finish the season is around that mark in the SEC. So that's right around where I thought we would end up. We took 1 L before I thought we would, but, hey, it is what it is. We'll see what happens later. Chris jumps back in and says, too early to talk about tourney seeding projections. I think so. just because there's still a lot to rinse out here, and I haven't even begun to really look at what other teams are doing in their rankings ahead of Auburn to determine where they would fit. But Auburn still got some work to do to close out this season. I mean, we could talk about projections at this moment for sure, just as easily as I'm talking about how you could finish the season right now. But the SEC tournament still has to be played, and I think that will come to bear where people are going to be ranked ultimately for the tournament. So for me, a little too early. I think once we get to about 2 or 3 games left in this season, that's a time to revisit that conversation. Michael Carlisle says, SEC on the road is tough on everybody. Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky, and Bama are in good spots going into March. Absolutely agree with that. Douglas Evans jumps in and says the game in Knoxville is going to be tough, especially with our road woes. I mean, listen, I think any game in the SEC is going to be tough on the road for anybody. I don't think anybody plays particularly well. Again, sans South Carolina, everybody's played poorly on the road. And even with South Carolina, they haven't played as well on the road as they've played in their own building. I think that when you're used to looking at Auburn and seeing the differences in road and home, you think to yourselves, oh, man, Auburn's bad on the road, and you forget that everybody's bad on the road. So that game's going to be tough, no doubt, and you can't chalk anything up as an automatic win, especially not on the road, but I think that Auburn is in a good place to control their own destiny right now. Chris S. says, playing a team off a bye at their crib should not be allowed in the schedule. That's a tough place to be, when you're going on the road versus a team that's had a bye week in basketball, especially it's not like football with the bye week. I mean, it is like football with the bye week, but it's rough, man, because of how many games you're having to play, especially with the physicality in the SEC and the travel necessary. Yeah, Auburn was in a tough place, man. You an emotional big game versus Bama, then on the road versus a rested Florida. That's a trap game if I ever saw one. And hopefully Auburn is ready to bounce back at home. Good to be able to go on a 2-game home stint after that, then get a bye, though. So hopefully you can get your momentum back going into the remainder of the season. Michael Carlisle jumps back in and says Lamont Paris should be unanimous Coach of the Year. I find it hard to believe that Lamont Paris doesn't at least win SEC Coach of the Year at this point in time. He absolutely should be in the National Coach of the Year conversation. Only 3 losses on the season. I don't know how many L's they would have to take down the stretch for that to change. At this point in time, he should have that. I mean, they should just be dusting off a place on the mantle for him to be able to take home that trophy. It's going to take a colossal collapse down the stretch for South Carolina for him to not win that at this point in time. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. All right, that's enough of me talking in here. I think that there is plenty to chew on in terms of the conversation around where Auburn could potentially finish. But I want to know what you all think Auburn's final schedule will be. And with your schedule prediction for the remaining 7 games, can Auburn capture the SEC regular season title? Want to hear that down in the comment section. Before you guys get out of here, make sure that you check in with our folks over at Rogue Shop. RogueShop.com is your place for America's #1 online dispensary. Use code REPORT when you do that. America's #1 online dispensary, again, is the Rogue Shop. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the content before you get out of here. I will be back at you guys with another morning drop tomorrow. But until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.
Drop!